The clock is truly ticking. We are ebbing closer and closer to November, at which time we're going to find out kind of what's going to happen. Maybe it'll be as late as January where we're going to find out exactly what's happening. I know a lot of people are absolutely all on board with wanting it to go one way. But I want to point out something that we need to be thinking about. A lot of preppers, a lot of people into preparedness, people just want to be prepared for what comes next. And my warning to you is this. Your side might not win. Now, there's a few of you out there who are going to be like, yeah, Special K. Let's get her into office and make my student loans disappear, and that will be fantastic. I think you might need to listen to her a little closer about her plans of what's going to happen. But I think most of us realize that that's probably not the optimal scenario. But even with the non-optimal scenario and with the optimal scenario narrowed out, there's also that whole middle ground there where we might not get an answer in November. We may not get an answer in December. We may not get an answer in January. We may end up having to decide this thing not in boxes, but rather by putting people in boxes. And that's, when you look at the world at large, that's kind of the way it goes. Once people lose their confidence in that box, there really is no other option. It goes into conflict. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you some warnings here. And I want to give you some food for thought. We're going to go down a thought exercise of what happens if Special K wins. And what can you do about it? What should you do about it? And hopefully I can open your eyes a little bit to realize that though this seems like nothing will ever happen, I want you to understand how fast things happen. We're going to look at a scenario that has actually played out in another country. And we're going to walk you through a timeline to show you how fast it goes from point A to utter chaos. From normal to profit to businesses flourishing to SHTF at a personal level and a national level. Stuff hitting the fan so bad that nobody can pick up the pieces. So, first off, we have a problem with the fact that Special K has apparently won the nod, even though nobody actually voted. That's a problem, right? Also, when we look at her record, what has she said in past debates? What has she said in speeches? She has promised executive action to seize people's boomsticks. She was going to give Congress, I think it's a month, or was it 3 months? If Congress doesn't act, she's going to pass executive orders to confiscate people's boomsticks. So that's a problem. And I don't know about you, but that's a red line. That is a red line. Once we cross that, there is no, the fuse is lit. I mean, there is no going back from that. So when we look at a situation like this, there are a couple options that you have. You can flee, you can fight, or you can submit. Let's give you an idea of what that looks like with Venezuela. In 1992, which wasn't that long ago, who here remembers 1992, right? There's a few people who don't, but 1992, Venezuela was the third richest country per capita in the Western Hemisphere. People were going there because it was so good. 1997, they were the second largest purchaser of U.S. pickup trucks. They had so much money that they were importing pickup trucks like nobody's business. They had oil, they had money, they had wealth. Wonderful, wonderful things. In 2001, socialists won. 2001. We all remember 2001, right? By 2004, they had socialized medicine. We already have socialized medicine here in the United States. And if you're like, no, we don't. Yeah, we do. It's called Medicaid and Medicare. And then we got a whole bunch of other programs on there. And everyone who's not in one of those programs, you've been forced to buy into an insurance program which functions just like those systems. We basically have a stupid socialist medicine setup. 2009, they banned boomsticks. 2009. That's not so long ago. 15 years ago, they banned boomsticks. Well, let's see how long it took them to start imprisoning their opposition. In 2014, they started imprisoning their opposition. Being an opponent to the state became a prosecutable offense. Of course, they call it something else, instigating or whatever. By 2016, just 7 years after boomsticks gone, there are food shortages across the country. And by 2019, they were massacring civilians who tried to protest. 10 years from boomstick bans to shooting people in the streets. How fast could it go here? I'd argue it can go even faster. And why is that? When the boomstick ban comes in play, there's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to play ball with that. They're not going to be all like, oh, okay, cool, we'll do that. There's going to be conflicts immediately, and it's going to be a civil war. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of how successful of a civil war it is, depending on whose side you're on. There will be. A boomstick ban of any sort, forced selling nationwide, will cause some serious problems. At least with the states banning things here and there, people can just move. And people are moving, mind you. People are definitely moving. So let's talk about your options here. I know it's a thought process you don't want to think about. You don't want to think about, might I have to flee my country in January? Or will my children have to pick up arms? Well, maybe go to some other part of the country where you may never come back from. That is, I know, a bunch of you are like, well, yeah, duh. But I know a lot of you haven't thought this through. You haven't gone there mentally. You haven't pictured it out. You haven't war-gamed it out in your mind of what this may look like if things don't go our way this fall. If the other side gets everything that they want, whether they convince enough people or whether they have enough people to make the results the way they want them to be. Either way, if the main keepers of power, the U.S. military, the police, the FBI, and all them decide that that's the way it went, well, friends, you and I are going to be on the short end of the stick. So, let's talk about fleeing. The first option with fleeing is to leave your state or your region and go somewhere else. And that is definitely going to be a smart option, right? To leave your area. And this is why I've been advocating it so strongly. And I know I keep getting pushback from you guys like, that's easy to say. That's easy to say, pick up and move. But I've been saying this. It's easier to do now than it will be when you have no time. When you have no one who's willing to buy your home. That will make it a lot harder to move. There's a difference between moving and fleeing. In the humanitarian world, we call this an internally displaced person. It's like a refugee, except you haven't crossed a national border. And mind you, if things go sideways, there are going to be a lot of people going to be forced to flee their homes. So the question is, will that be you? Are you in a place where you might have to flee? And if you are, I want you to just at least entertain the question. Is it better to move now rather than flee later? Now, the best of both worlds is you get a vacation home somewhere, right? But who here can afford a vacation home? Most of us are struggling to keep our roofs over our heads, right? Most of us are struggling with that. Most of us can't afford a vacation home. So the question is, where are you going to reside? And that's a tough question. I get it. But is it better to move, which is very difficult, than to flee, which is impossible, which is traumatic, which may end very, very badly? The next side of fleeing is to flee the country entirely. Up until recently, there really hasn't been a better place to go to. But now it's to the point where the United States has pressed the gas pedal of socialism so hard that even the Europeans are looking over us and going, they're nuts over there. They're absolutely insane. When you look at abortion policies, the Europeans think we're nuts. Like the liberal Europeans, they have restrictions on abortions. The United States is like absolutely trying to have zero restrictions. Some place in the United States, they're talking about abortions after. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And then a lot of the stuff that's being pushed right now, a lot of the rainbow stuff, they've blown past Europe. Europe's kind of like, no, that's just crazy. That is nuts. They look at us like we're nuts. And we are. By and large, as a country, the things that are being implemented, we're crazy. Going to one of those countries would actually be far better. Moving to like Scandinavian countries, right? Go to Finland, go to Norway, Sweden. As long as you don't go into the cities. I mean, they got their faults, mind you. But we've gone to the point where we're actually getting worse than they are. Now, that makes some of the other options, like Ireland, suddenly a little more palatable. Australia's kind of off the deep end too. Canada's off the deep end. New Zealand still seems to be relatively even-keeled, but they got their challenges too. Moving to third world countries that are more sensible, like the Philippines, Thailand, still not a great option, but, and one of the biggest problems with that is that they're so close to China, right? I mean, if China just starts taking over, they're going to be right in the way of things. I don't really think China really has that much expansionist intent as people say they are. But anyway, you can still look at the Caribbean escapes, Costa Rica, Panama. Panama's a hot place right now. A lot of people are talking about Panama. I know some people that are looking at moving to Panama. And they say that it makes sense right now. Costa Rica used to be the hot place. Panama is the new place. Where else? Colombia is a good word. A lot of these places, Spanish is really going to be helpful for you to know, or you're going to have to learn it, right? Argentina's kind of turning the corner, sort of, but that's kind of iffy. Then there's a bunch of islands in the Caribbean where you can get your passport and move your citizenship down there. That's definitely an option too. So those are kind of your options as I see them. I don't really see too many other ones. Singapore is always a good one, but that's a whole thing. It's a little hard to get in there, and once it's hard to stay there, actually. Singapore is pretty good. Taiwan would be good, except for the fact that, World War III, it's not going to go well for them. Same thing with Korea. Japan might be, but Japan's not super open to foreigners. So, there are other places, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of the gist out there. Most places you're going to be moving towards trouble unless you move south of the United States. So that takes time, though. You can't flee. It takes years and years of planning. In a lot of cases, it takes a bunch of money, too. To move your citizenship, it takes time. Or it takes money. Or takes some time and some money, right? That's the simple fact of it. So you can flee your state, you can flee your country. You can fight. You can flee, you can fight. But there's a couple questions that needs to be answered really, really fast. One is, who controls nuclear weapons? Because a real fight is going to take a lot of coordination. It's going to require a lot of logistics. It's going to require a lot of, and just going to be a lot of everything, okay? And if the other side controls nuclear weapons, that's going to make all of that really hard. It's going to make it really, really hard. Not unwinnable, not undoable, but have you seen the people over there? Have you seen what they think about you and me? Did you see them laughing, telling jokes when Trump was up there on the stage? Did you see how they responded to that? How would they respond to you? If you get in a conflict or whatever and you surrender, do you think that you'll survive that? Do you think that they'll play by the rules? Do you think that they'll show you compassion, mercy? That side doesn't have any at all. They justify the worst possible things that they can do against you and me. The things that they have already done to the people in January of the other year. We've seen their brutality. And when you look at other countries in Venezuela, you look at China, you look at Russia, you look at the brutality of this type of thinking. Don't expect any mercy from them. You either win or you flee or you pretend like you've never fought before. And that's submit. And I know a lot of you don't want to talk about that. You don't want to hear about that. And I can hear you already a bunch of you don't like the whole flee option either. You're going to go out there and you're going to go do something. Well, friends, if you're going to do something, make sure you're going to win. And that requires you working with a whole lot of other people and having a good plan that works. And that takes time and energy and resources and everything like that. And I'm not saying that that's not an option. I'm just saying there's a good chance it won't work. There's a lot of scenarios in which it doesn't work. So then you have the option of fleeing or submitting. And if you submit, at least on a surface level, but you keep on fighting in the background, that's called an insurgency, right? That's where you sabotage things. That's when you fight, but then you pretend like you're not, right? And that's another way of resisting. And then there's just the fact when you realize that you just need to protect your family, and that means that you just need to go along with things. You need to pretend like you're part of the torches and pitchfork crowd so that you don't end up there on the chopping block. And nobody wants to think about that, but welcome to reality. Welcome to reality. How long do you think people like me are going to last under that? Not very long. So fleeing is definitely something that needs to be thought about for me. Or whatever. I mean, think down the line here, friends, and start making your plans. I've been advocating you stocking up like nobody's business because if it comes to fight, we're going to need a lot of resources. If we can already have our logistics already handled, if we can just put the call out and just get like thousands and thousands of 5-gallon buckets full of food and get cases and cases of brass and lead, that's going to make the whole thing a whole lot easier. A whole lot easier. So you're not just doing it for yourself, but you're also doing it to help us all. There's a lot to think about there. There's a lot of whys. There's a lot of question marks about what things are going to happen. Don't get locked into one scenario. Remember, crises come in all sorts of different flavors. And we may go into a completely different scenario. But there's really not that many scenarios where being stocked up is really going to hurt you, right? It's going to help you in a lot of those scenarios, and a few of the scenarios where everything just goes peachy for the rest of our lifetimes, well then, we didn't need to prepare for that scenario anyway, because peachy means that we'll have plenty more opportunities to prosper and succeed, and yay. All right, friends, let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. But of course, remember that there are people looking over your shoulder. Keep things close to the vest when you need to keep them close to the vest. But let me know what you think and let others know what you think. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report.